right, I hope you had a really good time today, and I really would like to thank the AlterCOP for organizing all of these events. And today we'll talk about sustainable aviation fuel. And for those who are familiar with this domain, so it's a very hot topic. It's a very hot topic, not only in Singapore, but really worldwide. As you may know, the aviation sector seems to be what we call hard to abate, still contributing for 2-3% of GHG emission. But the trend is, well, with the traffic growing, especially in Asia, number of aircraft to be delivered and everything, so this few percentage might become far more than that if we don't react. So we have a great panel for today. I promise I will sit down after. So with me today, we have Ipin. Alors Ipin is at Silvers to introduce Neste. So you are a key account manager, commercial officer from Neste, one of the largest producers of SAF worldwide. So Dora Branyan, if I pronounce well your name. So you are director of sustainability and external relations for Marquis. And Marquis, she will tell you in a minute what it's all about. And very happy to have Béatrice Cassou from Titan. And as was said, so we are really representing today the entire spectrum of the sustainable aviation fuel. Now I can sit down. And just to get started, so we all came from different backgrounds. Maybe a quick word selfish about myself. So Arnaud from Impact, we are really more on the sustainable aviation certificates. So we arrived after all of those panelists does a job. But just to set the scene, so if you can, all of you, just to give a quick word about yourself, your company, and mostly how you are tackling the SAF for the audience today.
Good afternoon. Okay. Right, everyone. Thank you very much indeed. It's a pleasure to be here. So my name is Lee Ipin, working for Neste, not Nestle, as everyone alluded to. So I'm based here in Singapore, looking after the commercial business. And Neste is the world's largest producer for sustainable aviation fuel and renewable diesel. And we produced 100% from renewable raw materials, which is waste and residues. And that's how our products can achieve anywhere from 80 to 95% of the greenhouse gas emissions reductions. We'll talk a bit more later.
You know what's invigorating is to see all your guys' faces here on a Friday afternoon. I mean, it's coming that time, and I work for an ethanol company, so but I really appreciate being here and all of you guys being here because that means you guys care, and I want to tell you a little bit about what Marquis does. I represent the feedstock company, so feedstock goes into making sustainable aviation fuel, and then it becomes being able to be blended with jet fuel. So my feedstocks is ethanol, but there's various different types of feedstock. I think previously today you heard about the fats and residues that goes into the HEFA pathway. So what I would be more talking about today is the ethanol to jet pathway. At Marquis, we're really focused on the sustainability of that feedstock. We not only produce ethanol, but we also produce animal feed, a little bit of corn oil, and biogenic carbon dioxide. And we're really focusing on driving that carbon intensity score down. Carbon intensity is the grams of CO2 per megajoule of that energy source. So we're really trying to drive that carbon intensity score down, meaning we've got a CCS project that's ongoing right now. We've got CHP, which is recycling the heat that comes off our plant. And we're doing everything we can do with the farmers as well to be as sustainable as possible. And we're counting scope 1, 2, and 3 GHGs to go in that carbon intensity score. And we are aiming at becoming sub-zero. And what that means is when you turn that into SAF, we would love to have a zero CI sustainable aviation fuel. And of course, we have a lot more to talk about on that, and I'll pass that on.
Thanks Dora. So I'm Béatrice, very happy to be here this afternoon. And yes, as Dora rightly pointed out, it's a Friday, rainy Friday afternoon. So thank you very much for being here. I'm here representing the end user of the product that these beautiful ladies are doing here, and also potential customer for impact. Titan Aircraft Leasing is an aircraft leasing company, so we own a fleet of about 50 aircraft. On top of that, we are specialized in freighter aircraft. So we carry everything, a lot of things that you have in your house. Our aircraft carry a lot of things that you have in your house: e-commerce, goods, electronics, clothes, you name it. We're very much at the center of a lot of industries who are gathering a lot of bad press, to be honest. But we generally feel like we have a role to play. So we are actually the hardest to abate area of an already hard to abate industry. Freighter aircraft are older than passenger aircraft. It's usually second-hand market, so it's more difficult for us to be able to source brand new aircraft. Boeing and Airbus, for example, are making new generation wide-body freighters. These aircraft are not going to be on the market until, for the A350 freighter, 2026, 2027 actually, at best, depending on the delays. So I head our regional office here in Singapore. I'm in charge of commercial for Titan. Titan is a joint venture between Atlas Air, which is one of the world's largest freighter airline, and Bain Capital. And so on top of my commercial role, I'm also supporting our group chief sustainability officer in our SAF procurement strategy, because SAF is the only proper thing that we can do in order to decorrelate our growth curve from our emissions curve. So that's it for us.
Thank you. Well, it's amazing. So honestly, I hope you guys realize that we have the entire, value chain represented today. And so I heard already a lot of complex names, some complex notions, but maybe Hiping, if we can go back to the basic, can you tell us what is SAF, or at least what it comes from, and why it's so important in Asia?
Yeah, sure. So SAF, Sustainable Aviation Fuel, is produced based on our technology, which is HEFA, which is hydroprocessed fatty acid technology. We actually harvest or collect waste and residues, such as used cooking oil, animal waste fats, technical corn oil, fish fats. We collect them, we pre-treat them, remove all the impurities, and then we send it to our refinery using our patented technology, which is called Neste BTL. And essentially, it is using hydrogen to remove oxygen and turn it into virgin renewable fuel. Sounds very easy, but in reality, that is something that has it's in itself lots of challenges. So once we produce the neat SAF, it cannot be currently used into the aircraft right now, because ASTM, which is the American American Society for Test and Measurement, they are concerned about neat SAF going directly into the aircraft because of the lack of aromatics, which is something that is used for the fuel ring. So there is a limit of 50%, so we blend it with Jet A1, and as soon as it's blended, it becomes jet fuel. And then when that happens, you can effectively treat it as if it's a drop-in solution, and it can go into any of your supply chain infrastructure without modification, and the aircraft engines as well. However, as we speak, all the OEMs, major OEMs at least, Rolls-Royce, GE, Aerospace, Pratt & Whitney, Safran, they have all approved 100% SAF testing. And effectively, we are basically kind of like waiting for ASTM to accelerate the approval. Last November at the COP28 in Dubai, we actually did a test flight with Emirates on one of the Airbus 380 engines on SAF, 100% SAF. And so that was successfully done. So in a nutshell, it's produced from waste and residues that is sustainably sourced and then we deliver it to the aircraft through the current supply chain. So the key here is that we are integrated into the current supply chain without having to do any investment to your current infrastructure.
Thanks a lot. So no engine modification. We have a question about the performance, so we can assume that somehow chemically we are really close to, even if 100% similar to SAF versus Jet A1, somehow. Thanks a lot. Dora, you are from the feedstock. Today it seems that the US are quite of predominantly, bringing the SAF, producing the SAF. I heard, but maybe I'm wrong, that they are recycling a lot of corns in order to make from corns to SAF. So what do you think would be in Asia the main barrier, or what's your analysis of understanding about the feedstocks that we can get from the Asia perspective?
So you can produce ethanol from anything, but they've done a study where I guess rice straws are supposed to be the most abundant feedstock in Asia. But there's a problem. That is expensive. So the huge hurdle you have is money, 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 right? I mean, who wants to pay SAF that's going to be like 7 times or 8 times jet fuel? So we're talking, let's bring it back to the now. What you have right now is fats and residues. Neste is doing that. And I do get asked if we compete with Neste. I mean, we're not SAF producers. And the clear answer is no. The reason why is we're using about 1.5 million barrels of jet fuel every single day. When you fly from here to New York, as an economy, right? I hope you don't have to fly economy from here, JFK. But if you do, that is like 2 tons of carbon dioxide footprint that you just left, right? So you need an option to decarbonize, and the issue is how do you equate that cost and that demand? Right now, we need that supply. So we're not competitors because you need all the supply you can get to fill that, to be able to replace fossil fuels. Now we get to regulation, right? Another hurdle is how do you even out the price? It's a regulation, right? So right now you have International Civil Aviation Organization kind of oversees what happens in aviation. It's not just SAF that they're looking at. They also look at safety. I'm glad people are looking at it. It's a UN agency. About 193 countries are part of ICAO. And under ICAO, they've created CORSIA, which says we want to reduce our GHGs by 5% by 2030. That's coming up very quick. So how are we going to do that? CORSIA's approach is we're going to leave feedstock open. We're feedstock agnostic. So let's use whatever we can get to try to make as much SAF as possible, try to lower the cost, and allow customers to have an affordable means to fly.
So if I have a little garden and I want to grow sugarcane, I can pass it to you. You can make the approval and regulation to create SAF? Or?
Say again?
If I have a garden, I want to grow, I don't know, cocoa, sugarcane, or grow sugarcane.
Yeah.
So that's something you can handle. But what you say is that we need the approval from the ICAO or CORSIA to get it eligible fuel. Is that correct?
We have a lot. I mean, you can use any feedstock. It's really the cost of the technology. That's the hurdle. So you want to look at what's available, and to tell you the truth, it's cheaper to actually bring in Brazilian or American ethanol to this region to create SAF. And you're seeing a lot of alcohol to jet or ethanol to jet technologies being adopted by Australia and Japan, because that's exactly what they're going to do. They're going to produce SAF with importing ethanol.
Yeah, thanks a lot. So again, we have all the value chain represented, so it leads to a question of supply chain. So we have all those stakeholders, airline, fuel producers, government, and so on. So what do you think, Béatrice, would be the bottleneck, to make SAF economically viable when you get all of those milestones from the feedstock to the engine on an aircraft? If you can share your view on it.
So we have, as the end user, we have exactly the same challenges as Ipin and Dora mentioned. So at least there's some commonality there. No, so for us, it's very easy. Price and supply. we do not have enough SAF available to match the demand. That's because producing SAF, as you are now all starting to get, is not exactly easy. And price, you just mentioned, yeah, you can't really consider any type of feedstock. And on top of this, not every type of feedstock that you can think of. You were mentioning sugarcane just before. Sugarcane requires more or emits more CO2 to grow than it actually captures. So it's not exactly a viable type of feedstock either. So it's a non-stop equation that we have to solve. So on our side, as an airline, as an operator, it's really simple. It's price and availability. And we all wish we could go faster. So we're waiting for Ipin to really put her skates on this one.
I do want to talk about feedstock a bit, though. So sugarcane actually it depends on that calculation.
Yeah.
We always go back to science, right? If you're going to throw a bunch of fertilizer on it and then dump a bunch of water on it, yes, your GHG is going to suck, and you should not use that for sustainable aviation fuel. But if you have a very, very strict, transparent farm where you're following all these sustainability cultures and all these mandates, you can actually produce ethanol and then into SAF for very low GHGs. In Brazil, they use sugarcane, and I think they're seeing about 25, 30 grams of CO2 per megajoule.
Okay.
So about a 60% savings in GHGs.
Yeah, that's really good. But then, as you said, you have to follow a protocol. That's manpower, that's extra cost, that the reality is Jet A is just cheaper. So it's really, we need specialists, because buying Jet A, as we have started to also indicate, it's not buying sustainable fuel is not exactly like buying traditional fuel. Where do you get started? So we need the skills, and we also need our boards, our company boards, to be willing to invest this kind of money. Right now, a gallon of sustainable fuel is, on average, let's just say 2.5 times the price of a gallon of traditional Jet A. At Atlas, our board has been very clear. We are not going to, we want to support SAF purchase, but you need to find a way to transfer this cost down our value chain, and that means the end user. On average, for the passenger industry, for the passenger aviation industry, the yields are 0.89 cents per ticket. It is an extremely low yield industry. So that just gives you an idea of how difficult it is to solve as long as SAF prices are so high. And the concerns that you raised, Dora, with the type of feedstock that we can consider are extremely valid, because we need the entire value chain to keep this in mind.
Can I just chime in?
Of course.
No, I think Béatrice brought out a very good point, which is price. So from the angle of a producer, we need to break the dilemma, the chicken and egg dilemma, and looking at Europe, which really sets an example. The mandates creates a level playing field. The mandates actually instilled in confidence for investors to invest in SAF production. And when that happens, supply increases, we would naturally look to expect the economies of scale will then start to soften the price as we see. Now, another angle to look at it is that I think to compare SAF with Jet A1 is like comparing apple with oranges, because SAF is a decarbonization option. So one should probably compare that with hydrogen planes, hybrid planes, which are still in development, and speak to any of the OEMs who are not looking at anything before 2050. And it's also only 2.5 hours radius, which means, as what Béatrice has pointed out, for long-haul flights, SAF is the only viable solution. So if you compare that with a solution that is not going to happen for the next, 15 to 20 years, versus something that's available and is a OPEX, I think the answer is very obvious. All right, so it's very inconvenient, but if you compare that, this is the SAF and this is Jet A1, the delta is really the cost of emissions that Jet A1 is polluting. And the delta, really, we're considering all the climate change today, is it actually the delta between SAF and Jet A1, or is it higher? Because climate change is also creating public health issues, health crisis, with flooding, with infectious diseases that we're seeing, and that leads to higher healthcare cost. So I think it requires education. All of us here, hopefully at the end of the day when you walk out, understand that that's the difference here, and the paradigm shift is needed to say that, hey, if we want to fly, let's fly sustainably and responsibly.
But this is the issue, right? There is no global cost of carbon. We don't have a standardized cost of carbon.
It is in the mandated world, but in the voluntary market, carbon credits are not regulated, and that's where the perhaps the transparency and the governance is needed to be more robust, and the enforcement mechanism needs to also be slightly more robust.
I've had this discussion with friends before because, if you talk to insurance companies in the US, buying a house, insurance is going way up. And that's because of climate change, right? Places that used to not flood are now flooding. And so all this have a cost. But it's just insurance companies, and then that's not released to the public, and that is not an international standard. But I love how you say exactly, that GHG delta, it's actually the cost of the environment.
So, sorry, just to build up on the cost thing, absolutely. At our level, I'm going to tie it back to what you do, Arnaud. I promise.
It's okay, I feel useless, it's fine. I will get coffee, I'm coming back in 5 minutes.
Wait a sec, I'm going to promote your business. Hold on.
Beatrice is a strong advocate here already. So.
No. What I meant was that one of the avenues that we're exploring and trying to solve this cost issue is sometimes, because there is such a limited supply, we get contacted by a lot of SAF producers who are also asking us to participate to their capital investments. So it's OPEX, but there's indirect CapEx investment. That allows to drop the price. You can join a SAF buying alliance, or in our case, our Atlas Scope 1 emissions, so the emissions from our aircraft, are our customers, Timu, Inditex, HP, Apple, Scope 3 emissions. And that's where I tie back to what Arnaud is doing, because the possibility to develop a source of a revenue stream through SAF certificates and monetize Scope 3 emission certificates would be helpful for our business model.
Thank you for the advertising. We talk about so many things. Maybe to translate a little bit, Jet A1 or Jet A, it's traditional kerosene. When we talk about the reduction, the CO2 reduction equivalent for a SAF versus traditional kerosene, we talk about the full life cycle. So this is just this kind of quick comment. I have a comment on the price, but before that, we talk about feedstock, just a little bit on the feedstock. So we talk pros and cons, sugarcane, whatever. So in Asia, any top 3 or what are the promising feedstocks that we would see who have the best characteristic that could be used for SAF, and how to maybe create an economy and an industry in Asia? So any thought maybe to all of us?
So it's used cooking oil. Asians like to cook, and there's a lot of tempura to go around. So used cooking oil is one. Animal fats is another, which is tallow. And then we are also looking at, as I mentioned, technical corn oil, waste fish fats. Now, McKinsey has estimated that there's going to be about 50 million tons available even by the end of 2050, 40 million tons by 2030. As we speak, there is also the novel vegetable oil, something that we call cover crops, that Neste is actually looking to expand the feedstock Those are basically crops or plants, not crops, plants that are grown on marginal land, which doesn't compete with fruit production. So that alone will triple, as estimated, the current feedstock pool, which is roughly about 200 million. To put things in context, 2019, or actually this year, the global jet fuel is roughly about 300 million tons. It could go up to 350. If we do nothing today, the greenhouse gas emissions that aviation pollutes is going to double by 2050. So we can't wait.
Thank you. Any thought around the feedstock, which was the most promising to your perspective? Or?
Really, you need to have a blend. You can't just use one feedstock, because then it's a whole supply demand issue.
Yeah.
If you use too much of a one feedstock, then that's going to increase the demand of that. And we're already seeing prices of UCO go way up globally. And what that does is that's going to increase the cost of your jet or for your SAF, because now you're increasing the cost of the feedstock. So I think the approach is you want to have a blended approach. There's a lot of feedstocks that you can use now. The two promising pathway is HEFA and also ethanol to jet. But in the future, there's a lot of discussions on eSAF and Fischer-Tropsch.
Well, let's talk the future later. You are spoiling my articulation. But thank you. Thanks a lot for your comments. Lot of discussion, argument about the cost of SAF. So I hear everything. I hear SAF is 2-3 times, 5 times more expensive than traditional kerosene, whatever it is in reality. So maybe a question about, to all of you, I mean, we have a few minutes left. Who do you think should pay for the premium of the SAF? Is that a cost should be shared passenger, voluntary basis, or because we're on a compliance market, maybe it should be shared across the shareholders, the stakeholders of the SAF, or maybe the non-aviation customers? So maybe, Béatrice, you want to have a word about that, and everybody could react, of course, but who will pay this SAF premium to go toward decarbonization?
So the frustrating yet realistic answer is that it depends who you ask. If you ask the airline, it's the end consumer. It's the passenger. It's our customers at Atlas. To be frank, in our B2B activity, because we deal, our customers are companies, corporations, it is easier to consider passing through a portion of that cost. But as I was saying before, the constraints that we are working with are forcing us to be a bit more creative, and that's where the entire SAF certification trading market becomes interesting. My view is that it should be spread across the value chain until we find a better solution. So you do not want to put too much costs on the companies who need to invest in R&D in order to find the technologies that will allow us to finally reach neutral costs for SAF, or something similar to traditional jet fuel. But at the same time, I think everybody needs to pay for this. And in a way, CORSIA, which we haven't really talked about, is here to do that. CORSIA is the ICAO compensation scheme for carbon emissions, trying to make it super simple. And it is really the mandate that the entire aviation industry is under. It has started kicking in officially this year. And we are going to have to pay compensation for our carbon emissions compared to our 2019 baseline, 80% of our 2019 baseline, if I'm not mistaken, 85%, there you go. They have fun changing the numbers from time to time so that it keeps our auditing and compliance companies on their toes.
I think Singapore has done a very interesting scheme in terms of their levy that they're going to introduce, where the customers pay, but it is a minimal amount. It's a digestible amount, I believe. And I think in the US, what you see are those, the Inflation Reduction Act, which gives you the carrot, really. It gives you a blender's tax rate. So if you use SAF, you get money, or you get a tax reduction for that. In the EU, if you don't meet the mandates, then you get penalized heavily, and so that's on the airlines. So I think, like Beatrice mentioned, it's a blend that you want. There's no way the customers themselves can absorb it all. And let's not forget the jet fuel is really cheap to produce. I mean, when you get oil out of the ground, if you have sweet crude, jet kerosene, right? That's the initial thing that they came out with. So, I mean, to compete with it, you have to have some sort of subsidy. And I think a lot of these carbon schemes are taking from the penalizing oil and gas companies for carbon emissions. That could possibly go into SAF as well. Yeah. So, again, blended approach.
And maybe keeping to a quick comment, because I guess in the US today, SAF is subsidized. We don't know for how long, by the way. And in Asia, I would just bring maybe for your answer, I don't know, the price sensitivity is quite important because we have 60% of the seats today are from low-cost carrier. So if you put, I don't know, $20, $30 on a Manila-Singapore flight, might as well, impact air traffic and therefore GDP from potential countries. So it's a complex equation, but Yiping, what do you think still about the cost sharing, about the SAF?
Yeah, I'll combine my response to the question I see here, what is Singapore's approach to SAF? So as a backdrop, airfare basically has increased more than 10% compared to pre-2019. But is anyone slowing down the flying? No. So that's one. Flying continues despite the airfare going up. Some are more than 10%. If you ask me, I think it falls squarely on the traveller. The traveller, and that's the approach of the Singapore government. They have done a trial for 18 months using, having 3 or 4 corporations having the sort of a Scope 3 scheme. But the take-up rate says a lot, and Singapore with more than 90% of the travel is by air. So CAS says that's it. We're gonna have to make everybody pay, and so that's where the SAF levy came in, and this is the only model in the world, I have to say, that the CAS, a Civil Aviation Authority, stepped forward to do the procurement. So Singapore to Bangkok, $3, Sing to Tokyo, $6, Sing to Heathrow, $16 on economy class. It is, literally cheaper than a cup of Starbucks. So the idea here is cost disbursement. So when we pass on the cost to the airlines, technically, airlines being a very elastic industry, they will obviously refuse to raise prices because they will lose the market share tomorrow. So the idea here is to make travelers pay and then keep the airlines whole, and then the suppliers will then say, hey, you produce and then supply.
When you say traveler, it's not on voluntary, because I heard that the voluntary today is 0.5% of the what it should be. Is that true? So 2026, so Singapore is making some...
1% SAF, roughly. It's a soft target. It's a soft mandate. So it's roughly 1%. The levy is calculated based on roughly what they're going to get with 1% of the airport volume. So that's something that they have done. To be fair, whether this model can be replicated elsewhere remains to be seen. For Europe, the obligated parties are on the suppliers, and simply because it is easier to administer. So whether this will be replicated in the other, APAC countries remains to be seen. And I think many governments are taking a very keen interest now. South Korea has, just this year alone, South Korea has announced a SAF mandate in 2027. Indonesia has announced. Thailand says they're contemplating, and then Japan has come up with investment credit for incentives for suppliers. So it has this knock-on effect, a domino effect that actually has this very positive peer pressure on the neighboring airports.
Wonderful, thanks a lot. So I think it's time for Q&A. We are a bit late, but let's open the floor to the audience. So who has any questions? Again, we are so many things we haven't been able to talk about, but Any questions somewhere? Yep. That's a new question. I don't know if you...
Thank you. I understand that up to the end of last year, the supply was in constraint, and now many companies are considering, right, to enter into this SAF supply. But if you look at the current demand, what is the situation between supply and demand today? Because around the world, only Europe has this mandated target. And then Singapore is still very small volume. You mentioned many other countries have expressed their soft target, but how realistic are other markets coming along to build the demand?
You mean soft demand?
The demand of SAF. Because earlier we discussed the pricing. In order to have the price down, you need to have the supply up. But if the demand is not there, suppliers may not jump in.
So the mandates will create market certainty. That's where the demand certainty comes in, which means everybody will be paying. And if one airport actually institutes the levy and the others isn't, then, and Singapore government, as you can see, the levy is actually very, very mild. The idea here is to balance it with the competitiveness with the other airports. So in terms of demand, it's if you ask us, it's based on our experience that we see in Europe on the roadside, is very much driven by mandates because it will change behavior. On the other hand, you do need some short-term incentives to help to cushion the cost a little bit. But in certain countries, when you see that incentives ends, the demand vaporized, and then the companies goes bust. So we need to strike a balance, and really each jurisdiction needs to manage that very closely, and with not just government to government, but is within ministries as well. And so, to answer your question, demand. From our perspective, I think so far, as history has shown, is very much driven by mandates, which changes the behavior because it creates a certainty.
And if I can maybe add a little bit on what Yiping just said. So we have demand coming from the compliance, government and so on, but as well there is a demand from the non-aviation sectors, and it is what we just talked with Béatrice. So meaning that some corporations, if they want to comply with some requirement, SBTi and so on, to offset their travel emission, they can, through the SAF certificate, which is connected to the SAF, of course, by buying this, be able to be, I would say, clean with regard to regulation and offset the travel emission. So we can see as well a demand driven from the non-aviation sectors, and there is some monetization of that from cargo. I think you heard the guy from DHL earlier, and so on, which is another stream of demand coming from outside aviation sector, just as a quick comment.
So maybe also, sorry.
No, just to give you an idea of the size of the demand. We just touched on CORSIA a bit earlier. So CORSIA forces us airlines to pay a compensation for our carbon emissions up to a certain threshold. With some friends who run a fantastic software for emissions accounting for airlines, we did a simulation. And this is based on, so for the aviation specialists here, this is based on ACARs and actual flight patterns. And we projected, we ran this model for 2027 and extracted all the flights that would be subject to CORSIA in 2027, applied a rather conservative carbon ton price at $5. The total CORSIA cost estimate that we estimate, and this is just a fun thing we do, so nothing official, but we calculated that it all tallied up to $3 billion USD for the year 2027 alone. So whether we want it or not, the demand is there. You have 126 countries who are signatories to the CORSIA scheme, if I'm not mistaken, and this is just year one, 2027, when payments become mandatory for everybody. So just something that supports the fact that there is demand for SAF. Right now, if you're a SAF producer, EPIN, maybe I'm romanticizing this a little bit, but it probably feels like you're in Palo Alto at the end of the 90s. There's a true gold rush at the moment.
Maybe just to add on, we need a whole ecosystem to work, you know. There's one party that actually plays a role in Europe as well, and that's the airport companies, the airport corporation. Sweden, Swedavia, Finland, Heathrow, the Netherlands, Düsseldorf and Brussels airports, they have actually come out with schemes to incentivize airlines to take up SAF. How they do that is actually they will channel the polluting, you know, the NOx charges and the landing charges that are, you know, that they can actually bring in as revenue, and they channel it to airlines that take up SAF as a part of incentive. So for the airport, it's cost neutral, but it helps to change behavior. And so that's another way to, it's a small way, but actually it's, you know, it's helping to shape the behavior.
Airport and infrastructure readiness for SAF will be another panel, I guess, we need, because it raises a lot of questions. Anyone would have to ask any question? We have 5, maybe we can negotiate 10 minutes left for the panelists today. Oh, okay.
Oh, there's a question.
Alors, to create Singapore-made SAF, are the cooking oil and aminal fat imported? Dora, do you want to take it, or?
Yeah,
I'll
take it. Yeah, for sure, for sure. We only have 5.5 million people here, and we have to source globally for SAF, just because there's just not enough Singapore. Singapore is a very small economy, so yes, we do source globally.
Thank you.
And then we're going to see a shift here soon when Trump goes into office and the tariffs start happening. I think we're going to start, I mean, this has nothing to do with Singapore's importing, because we have to import everything here. But
you're right.
In terms of the supply chain, I think we're going to start seeing a shift in this next year. Dun, dun, dun.
Lots of changes. Yeah, I think we're expecting a lot of shifts, you know, with regards to UCO, and then there's also other movements, news from China, for example. Yeah. So they're all going to start changing the trade flows.
Yeah, so many things to talk about the policy and regulation. I don't know if you have time, but is there any question? Because if not, I have. So, and we have 2 minutes more. Last question, maybe. Okay, so maybe the last closing question. I guess everything that we were talking about today, about the SAF and so on, I mean, all of that initiative, all those really skilled company represented here today, what we are doing is really somehow, of course, to decarbonize the aviation sector. So there is some holy goal to be a net zero for aviation sector by 2050. SAF is supposed to be a major contributor by up to 65% of this decarbonization. So quick last word, do you think it's doable, realistic? Are we on track? If you can share to the audience how we, you know, be able to reach those 2050 targets on SAF. Want to start?
I can start. I cheated because I looked up the IEA website right before I came here, and it said we're totally not on track. So I'll just use what it says on their site.
I think IATA said yes for 25 already, no?
But I think it's, like you said, the gold rush, I think that describes it exactly, right? Like, my kids, when I tell them to do homework, they don't do it until Sunday night. And that's what we're doing here. These airlines are not going to pay for it until it's Sunday night. It's 7:30 p.m. and your bedtime is 8 p.m. And so, yes, right now we're not on track, but I think there's going to be a madhouse coming as we get closer and closer to these regulations and these sticks coming.
And what would be your wish list to policymakers to be on track in the future?
Yeah, okay,
it's Christmas soon, that's why we have Santa Claus is coming soon. So what you expect?
is to base it on science. The problem is policymakers are creating a lot of these regulations, and it is not based on science. If you look at the default scores under Corsia, they're completely not realistic. They're not updated. And so I want policymakers to use science. Let's use a standardized life cycle analysis approach. Let's have a global life cycle analysis that we all agree on, scientists agree on, and that's my ask.
Thank you. Béatrice, your ask, your Santa Claus gift.
If no one can guess it, then it means no one has been paying attention. Cheaper SAF.
Here we are.
No, but yeah, I think on the regulatory standpoint, we've had, it's great. You need to start somewhere. Honestly, it's a brand new world, so we're doing the best we can here. Policies have started shaping a market that from scratch, really. But definitely, we can be smarter with our policy, so that's really what I hope for, that we are able to make more integrated policies that make it just simpler for us, the end users, to go out there and buy SAF.
Wow, and you know that for the AlterCOP 29, so Neste promised 20% discount on every volume of SAF purchased today. So Gladstein Epping at the end of the event. Special discount.
Code EP20.
We need to step aside and talk.
Epping, the last word is for you.
I think it's very simple. We should act now. Hopefully, by the end of the session today, you become the advocates of what SAF is. When the levy kicks in, you will know that you won't even notice it, because in the older days you have a jet fuel surcharge which is $100 in Singapore, and so I think we need to act now, take ownership, and be the advocate of renewable fuels.
Thank you. Big round of applause for the panelists. Thank you.